Welcome to Sell Like You, the ultimate sales podcast that will teach you how to make sales your superpower, transform your mindset, and in doing so, explode your sales beyond your wildest dreams. I'm Harriet Mellor, and over the last 17 years, I've helped hundreds of top companies around the world, including my own, make more money and qualify more leads using simple strategies that work. In this podcast, you'll learn how I generated over 10 million in annual sales, along with the sales techniques, processes, and tools that will work for you to generate more dream-aligned clients and scale your business beyond what you thought was possible. If you're sick of the boring, outdated, and pushy sales tactics of the past, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Now, if you've been here for a little while, you will know that I love LinkedIn. It's where I hang out. It's where I make friends. And today's guest is now a LinkedIn friend, and now we're making it a podcast friend, and eventually we'll make it an in-person friend. And so, Bryce, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here. Now, before we start talking about leadership, let's go back, because you're in leadership now. Let's go back to being an account executive. What kind of account executive were you?
Thanks for having me, Harriet. It's a pleasure to be here. And what type of account executive am I, or was I, should I say? To be honest, I never stopped selling, so still am. But I would say my personality and my style of selling is focused on relationships. I am a big believer that people buy from people. You probably heard that before. I'm sure you have. And so just being my authentic self and actually creating a relationship, a real connection with the prospect or the person I'm speaking with is really important to me, because I feel like you can get away with a lot more questions throughout the sales process. The close becomes easier, discovery questions become easier. And if you're selling into enterprise, then being your champion becomes easier. There's really no downsides to having, I think, a really authentic approach into how you approach sales. So that's my style of selling, the relationship builder.
Where did you learn that was so important? Was it before sales? Was it during sales? Was it a bit of everything?
Great question. To be honest, I don't think I ever learned it per se. I think as time went on, as I started getting into my career, 1 or 2 years down the track, I became aware that there were different styles of selling. You know, you go down the routes of looking at books. So I didn't realize what I was doing until I read more about it at the start. But what I found was I just naturally gravitated to wanting to have a genuine connection with someone, because I enjoy, speaking with people and finding out more about them. So my personality just naturally gravitated towards building a relationship with prospects over anything else to start with.
Any books in particular that stand out from back then?
From back then, gosh, I can't even remember the first books I picked up, to be honest with you. I would say that more recently, I guess because it's top of mind, a book that I think I wish came out years ago when I first started in sales it's a book by two gentlemen over in the States, and they analyze millions of cold calls and demos, and they came up with the ideal way to sell, and it's called the JOLT selling method. Have you heard of it before?
No.
It's incredible. So it pretty much boils every interaction, every sales, and it distills it into the one core reason why deals don't get closed. And it's due to indecision. And the JOLT effect, is it's an acronym that stands for, first of all, you need to judge what type of indecision they're experiencing. And then OLT of JOLT stands for, depending on what type of indecision they fall into, you apply the certain methodology to it. So you either offer a recommendation, or you either limit the exploration, or you take risk off the table. T. This book honestly changed my perception in the way that I actually sold just 2 years ago, completely. So I recommend it to anyone listening, the JOLT Effect.
We'll grab a link and pop that in the show notes as well. And I'm definitely going to download that based on the passion you've just given to me around the JOLT methodology. Amazing. So you've obviously identified that throughout your sales career around having those conversations and around really being authentic and building relationships, which is really all sales is. And I think, when I get asked a lot about sales, I've been selling for a very long time, but at the beginning I used to hate it. Like, it was not something I particularly wanted to get into. But then when you actually understand what selling is, and then And it's almost a superpower, how I describe it, is that if you can understand sales and be an incredible salesperson, you can do anything. You can start a business, you can change jobs, you can change countries, you can, build a personal brand, close a personal brand, and whatever that needs to be, if you can understand what's important when it comes to selling.
I completely agree with you. It's one of those careers where if you can be really successful in this one thing, you can literally run a company. You can, like, the skills that come with being an expert in this career path set you up for life, both in your career, but also personal too. Being able to, I feel like sales and relationships are so closely aligned, like personal romantic relationships. I feel like it's so closely aligned to sales as a career path. And I think as I've learned more about sales and realizing that there's such a mirror between what I do in my career and what I do in my personal life and how I manage relationships, as I started to draw, similarities between the two, I feel like I actually improved the quality of my relationships in my personal life just from understanding that there's a correlation between my career and what I do outside of work.
What do you think did that? Like, what component has improved your personal relationships based on what you've learned about being a salesperson?
Harriet, you're probably
Dates.
yeah,
Line them up at the
no,
bar. Is
no,
that right, Bryce?
you know what? No, it's actually more of an emotional thing, to be honest. I would say the biggest thing I took out. But yes, when I was a single man and I wasn't happily engaged, absolutely the confidence to cold approach is is definitely there because you naturally get the confidence. But in more serious relationships with your partner, with a partner, it's the empathy and the ability to allow your partner or your prospect to feel heard and to feel seen. It's such a powerful skill that unlocks so much comfortability between two people. When someone feels valued, what they have to say is valuable, and you're really listening in and giving them a platform that's safe to talk about their challenges, talk about what keeps them up at night, what they want to achieve in life, what they want to achieve with their business. It goes hand in hand to being a top tier seller. Empathy and giving a really safe space to connect with someone, I think, is important.
What a connection you've made between those two. And I think that that's really interesting. I mean, I use a lot of analogies when training, especially people coming into the industry. And there's always a dating analogy. And, especially on the different age demographics or depend on where this sits. But I find then, giving that example of using that communication. But I think looking at it from that empathetic perspective, from a personal relationship element, is really interesting and definitely one that I haven't heard of very often, which is really awesome to see. And it obviously shows in the way that you obviously approach your way of selling. Now, you're not an AE anymore and you've moved into leadership. Talk me through that process. What was it a decision you made? Was it an opportunity that the company presented you? Talk me through that journey, because that's a very different role to being solo on your own, fighting for your own number, to now leading a team and being responsible for more than just yourself.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It was an interesting transition, and I think it's a transition that a lot of account executives today aren't working with enough information to make the decision to move into that role. And I think there should be a lot more resources out there for account executives thinking about this next step. To be honest, I started in my current company. We had explosive growth recently. We went from 9 mil to $100 million in valuation in just 3 years. And I was there as employee number 5 and as the sole AE for a good portion of it. So a lot of the time, a lot of that business and a lot of the outbound sales that came out was really left up to me. And you go from being this literally an individual contributor to the sales pipeline to then them expanding and to them growing the team and new products and launches. And so your baby, it gets like what you've built with this outbound funnel, it gets bigger than you are. And for a seller who's quite egotistical, it's sometimes hard to take your hands off the reins and allow other people to shine. And I think initially when this was starting to happen, I had a conversation with myself. I reflected on what my career was here. Do I want to be an IC? Do I want to move into leadership? Does the business want me to move into leadership? Because that's also just as important. And I came to the realization that I wanted to move into the management role because I was already doing some mentoring on the side with some early sales graduates and SDRs and even some AEs. And I was also helping scale up businesses through Blackbird, which is one of our lead investors, helping go to market with early stage founders. And I found myself being extremely invigorated, and it actually gave me a lot of energy. And I felt so happy to be helping people that I realized that this was the path for me. And so having that exposure really helped me make that decision. And I haven't looked back. I love my team. I love helping them. And I get such a kick from seeing someone close incredible deals or have a really good month because I was able to be a key catalyst in their growth and development.
Wow. You saw that obviously early on and you were part of something really exciting. And I think, being those early stages in a business of that size that has scaled to that element is insane. And what a journey to go on. And I guess then one that you could have stayed in to then continue to be that sole contributor as part of as part of a sales team. What have you, like, I'm looking at both sides. I'm like, what have you gained and what do you think you've lost? Maybe if we can look at both sides, from being an AE to being a sales sole contributor to managing a team. What have you gained and what have you lost?
That's such a good question. I think you lose recognition. You absolutely lose recognition. You become the star player on a team and you move into the cheerleader role. And look, on paper, that sounds like who would want to do that? Who would not want to be LeBron James, on the Lakers? But it really comes down to, do you see more value in helping people and do you get more value from helping people? So I think I gained a lot more job satisfaction from stepping into this role. I think I lost a lot of recognition, and honestly, you actually do, for a portion of time, you take a bit of a pay cut moving into leadership because you're not closing as many deals. You're not bringing in the big contracts that everyone relish as an AE. You relish in for at least a week, and so does the business. And eventually, when you get paid, you relish in that paycheck too. You don't get that. You don't get that commission at the end of the month. That's the same. You get something else that's a bit more fulfilling. So you obviously, I think, in most cases, you take a bit of a hit to the bank account too at times.
You said that it was not about you anymore in one of your posts, and you've just clearly explained that here. You said that you're going from from being the hero in the moment, the LeBron James, the shooting the hoops and getting the recognition for it, and that ego takes a hit. How have you overcome that? Because obviously you're very passionate about helping people, but from your ego, it's still going to be shouting out like, "What about me? Let's do this. Let's put our name on it." How have you had to transition out of that, and what's been some of the learnings around that?
Oh, you ask great questions, Harriet. I'll give that to you. And it's making me think that how I've overcome it. Look, I can only speak from my personal experience, and I don't want to speak to or speak for anyone else in this instance. As I matured as a person in my personal life, I've been doing a lot of work on myself in my personal life to learn to release control from situations and not be as selfish in certain circumstances. I do a lot of that work on myself with, through therapy, through counseling, and through books and self-help. As I've started going on this journey, I've realized that the true version of who I am really lies in helping people and being able to allow other people opportunities that they wouldn't have had, because I've, realized that I'm so grateful to my very first mentor who took a chance on me to give me my first opportunity in sales, in corporate sales, that is, when I was, just a young kid, 21 going on 22, trying to find a job, had no corporate sales experience. And there was a man who I interviewed with at a really, really large company, and with no experience whatsoever, he said, I like your drive and what you have to offer, and so I want to give you this opportunity. That has stuck with me my entire life. And, to this day, I still stay in touch with him, even though he's on the other side of the world now, because I'm so grateful to him for the opportunity. And I've realized that I'm so grateful to it, and I want to give other people that opportunity to, I want to be what he was to me, to other people. The person that was able to really help you hone in your skills, saw something in you that other people didn't. I think that for me has been really important. It's what's really allowed me to make the transition and want to make the transition.
You said before you mentoring, so is that your giving back today?
Yeah, definitely. I do mentoring sessions with various types of people from various walks of life. junior SDRs just starting their career through to seasoned founders who are looking to make their first sales hire, bring in their first customers with a new product they have. And I do all of this just for free, just out of in my spare time. I just want to help people. I just want to impart some of the knowledge that I've gained, some of the experience I've gained, in a hope that it helps someone else move forward in life.
You obviously share a lot on LinkedIn. There's, that's how we've met. And there was a post in particular around this move and around, the components that came from being from a role into a leadership role. You're obviously mentoring. How important do you think that LinkedIn has played a part in your progression of your role and your opportunities that you've created?
Well, to be honest, I would say that not as much as I would like it to have in my career at this stage. I see LinkedIn as a long-term bet, to be honest with you. At this stage of my career, I think I'm investing time into LinkedIn because I personally believe that the future of sales lies in social networking and personal brand. And I see so much value in building that right now. And currently, really what it's allowed me to do is that when I connect with someone who is a prospect, or even when I'm having conversations with senior stakeholders at other businesses, especially through Blackbird or through go-to-market and the founder space, it gives me a lot of, honestly, it builds a lot of people's perception before they meet me. By them seeing I have a lot of posts, I have a following, I've got engagement, little things like that, it to them pre-validates, or this person knows what he's talking about, even though I might have absolutely no clue. If a lot of people are listening to me, then I'm going to have more seniority naturally when I speak to someone. There's more respect gained. I think it does a lot in that instance. It does a lot behind the scenes that I probably don't see right now. But I have so many connections. I've made so many friends through LinkedIn. I've gotten invited to sales meetups and attended certain events and stuff to go and network with people. It's opened up my network tenfold to what I could have ever done without it. And I think the value of the network I have, or at least the value that I believe I have in my network, is if I was to get fired tomorrow, could I reach out or put a post on LinkedIn and land a job the following week? Probably. And I think that speaks volumes to the power of social media and your network online.
So social proof obviously, plays a part. You said there around social selling being you think that that's going to be the future. I mean, obviously it's part of our now, but in terms of why do you think social selling is going to be our future?
I think sales will revert back to where it was since the beginning of time, where people were buying from people. There is so much marketing bullshit out there at the moment. People are being hammered constantly by sales reps in every single region. It's such a growing industry and discipline. Like SaaS sales it's so overcrowded now. And I think eventually buyers they're already starting to smarten up in the way that they purchase from companies and from reps. And so having a funnel that you create on LinkedIn for whatever it is you're selling, whether it's someone hearing your name, someone seeing a post from you, or seeing you comment something on LinkedIn, just seeing your name online and being a voice in the industry or space that you're in, that will start to create it'll create a pull rather than you always having to push for a meeting. The value of your network and the quality of your engagement, I think, will play a key role in that. And if you can create that in a certain industry, you can demand a lot of money from the industry that you end up being in, because everyone knows your name in that space.
LinkedIn's really interesting because I think that we said this off air earlier around, the success around posts and analytics and likes and shares and all that. And actually, what does that mean? And for me, I look at a lot of them are vanity metrics around, did we do well with our likes and where did that get us? But what was the actual outcome or return from that? I think it's really interesting because I agree with the fact that social selling is a part today. I wonder where it's going in the fact that it's so transparent around what you're actually trying to do, which can almost be a detriment to the sales cycle. Because if you think about it, if I pick up the phone, have a conversation with you, and I can get you
warmed up and excited to be speaking to an absolute stranger on the phone, then the chance I'm going to get you to have a bit more of a conversation with me. Whereas if we look at the way, and maybe this is just because it's been done wrong, is that if we look at LinkedIn, when you are going out there, and if I pick up the phone, I can ask you a question straight away. If I do it on LinkedIn, I have to request a connection. I have to then be like, hey, great to connect. Here's some value. Here's something else. Here's something else. Or if you do what most people are doing right now, which is connect, I have these 17 things I'd love to talk to you about. And we do it today. And then it's just, for me, I just block them, delete their connection and move on with my life. But they're kind of the two options, either spam them with something or take a while to nurture them. Whereas if we just go direct for the phone call or go out and have a meeting or bump into you at a networking event, do you think that social selling is going to override or supersede phone calls and in person?
I think there's always going to be a place for phone calls and in person. Like the act of cold calling will never, ever, ever go out of fashion, and will never stop delivering incredible results, I think, across the board if you do it well. But I think social selling will start to creep up in the percentage of funnel as a channel eventually in the future, because I think a lot more buyers will naturally gravitate towards are on these platforms, especially as if you think about it really, really realistically, the older generation currently, people in their late 40s, early 50s, the baby boomers, they're leaving, they're retiring. The new generation of people, the millennials, the millennial managers, that this term is being coined, are the future of business. And all of these people are on LinkedIn because they see value in networking, a personal brand, social media. And your key decision makers eventually are going to be on LinkedIn. At the moment, there's definitely a handful of people that just aren't, because they're an older generation. Typically, they're not as tech savvy, but the next generation is on LinkedIn. And so it's really important to get ahead of the curve and being on a platform, building up a personal brand, and not even just spamming people with, like, the way you do it is also really key, which we can get into, but building that personal brand and a community around your profile and who you are is I think is crucial right now.
I was absolutely going to say around the demographic and the age ranges that that we're dealing with. And interestingly, I think that's an interesting piece to move into with regards to who you're managing, because if you're now managing a young, evolving sales force, as well as some experienced people in there, that may have been around for a few more years, how are you navigating the expectations and the way they approach sales depending on the generation that they're coming from?
Another great question. Look, to be fair, I think the challenge that I personally experienced, and you know what, I don't think this gets spoken about enough when in sales, and just, I guess, in moving from any IC role into a leadership role, is that there needs to be a shift in your mindset and the culture that you're starting to create and the personal brand you have internally. As an IC, and let's think about this from an account executive, and I don't mean to generalize here, but let's just generalize for the sake of this conversation. An account executive will be in a role, and if they have a bad quarter, they're blaming it on, we had a really, really shit lead list, or, terrible time in the market, the product needs to be improved, right? There's all of these excuses for the reason why you're underperforming, and it starts to feed into the culture of the sales team. And the move that you need, or the shift you need to make, is no longer about blaming the business, blaming leadership in the company, blaming external factors. And it now needs to move towards, well, how can we improve this? Well, what can we do? What could I have done better as a seller? How do I avoid being part of the problem or part of the toxicity and start to be part of the solution and the positivity? And I think as a sales rep, making that transition can be quite difficult at times, because it means parting ways with some key relationships. You need to change the type of relationship you have with your colleagues. All those types of things need to change in the way that you behave internally. I think that's really important in terms of the transition. And if you do that correctly and you start to, successfully remove yourself from those conversations, then you start to become more respected when it comes to anyone who's an account executive or a seller within your team. So that's one of the most important things, is making that transition. And then when it comes to managing, maybe people that are older than you, look, it has its challenges, but you always need to have a mutual respect for each other. You need to respect that salesperson who's been selling for 10 years, twice as long as me, has things and has a way of selling that works, and that works for them. and they're a senior seller on the team because they've done it a million times before. And you don't treat that sales rep the same as you would treat an SDR in the team. There needs to be mutual respect and understanding from each other in order for you to be successful in a role. Because eventually, ultimately, the team performance and that individual's performance directly impacts you and your performance and your brand and branding internally too. Is this guy doing a good job, or is he doing shit, and is he causing a really toxic culture? Because we're going to get him out of leadership if so. So it's just as important.
With now looking at targets, obviously you're responsible for the number, but you're not necessarily responsible from this is how much money I need to bring in. It's now around how do I enable a team to bring this revenue in? What has had to shift in the way that you previously would have looked at a quarter and gone, we're not going to hit it, even if you weren't a leader, but you were part of the team, you're like, right, this is on me. I'm gonna bring this bad boy home and let's go. Not necessarily being part of the reason in terms of the actual coalface, but having to support a team, and you see that they're not about, they're about to miss quarter. What do you do? Like, how do you handle that without running in being like, give me the phone, let me go, like, I got this?
I definitely think there are times where you're just like, oh, I really, really want to jump on this. I know I could nail this demo, but you have to just, I've done the research. I know this account inside and out, and you want to take the reins. But I guess that's just part of being a leader, right? It's giving your team the ability and the space to fail if they need to learn from their mistakes, and giving them the utility to be able to take bits of information and give it to them to run with it and absolutely kill it if they do. So that's a big mindset shift that I've had to make. But for me personally, what I've done is I typically try to think about it is, what can I do, whether that be an event or a dinner. Like, we actually just ran this last quarter. We did a dinner, an end of quarter dinner, and we had so many deals in the pipeline that we were looking to close. And so I said, let's just do a really intimate dinner, and we'll invite all of the prospects that are currently in a sales cycle to a dinner at the end of quarter, as a way for us to build that relationship, but ideally sign them before quarter end, which landed us 4 deals, which was great. And that really, really helped. So I think about ways in which I can enable the team to have more face time with their customers, to think outside of the box, or even for me to think outside the box for the team to then run with. So instead of me saying, okay, well, I'm just going to do all the dials myself today, it's what can I do to enable the team to, one, increase motivation, and 2, actually hit their numbers in a way that's not just dialing the phone and just calling more.
So when you've got a team that's underperforming, or maybe just not far off, obviously coming together with ideas, if you've got somebody specifically in the team that's not quite pulling their weight, how have you navigated that?
It's tough because you have to be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. And I think in these uncomfortable conversations, you should really start to think about it as these conversations incur the most growth in a person. I've been on the receiving end of these conversations from, leadership and C-suite at times, but that's what really helped me grow inside of that role when my back was against the wall. And it's the same thing when it comes to managing sellers, I believe. Being okay with leaning into the uncomfortable. Hey, this is what could have been done better. This is where you're underperforming, and also using a lot of data to back it up. Because one thing that salespeople do, and when I say salespeople, I'm talking about myself just as much.
I didn't say, I'm like, when I talk about salespeople as being this, I'm also talking about myself.
Exactly. I'm speaking from direct experience. Yeah, you end up coming up with so many excuses, or you think about you think you've done so much more than you actually have. At times, like, I feel like I made 100 cold calls today. It's like, no, you've made 20. And I feel like that sometimes after a cold call session, because I will always be selling. But it's important to come with data and backing up with and making sure that your hot data and CRM hygiene is number one across the team, so that you have data to be able to use in these such scenarios, and then give them data backed decision making of what you need to do in order to improve. And sometimes maybe the data doesn't actually translate to results. And then that's a question of, well, maybe it's the script you're using, the tools you've been given, it's the way you're running meetings, it's the subjective things, and it's the things you can't quantify that's going wrong. if I'm making 100 cold calls and you've got Jane Doe and John Smith, and they're both making 100 cold calls, but Jane's booking 5 meetings and John's booking 1, they both made the same amount of activity. Well, is there something wrong in the types of accounts that John's going after? In his cold call script, in his talk track, is he not pushing where Jane would usually push for a meeting and push back from a smokescreen objection? Is John not doing that? So then you look at the intangibles. So coming with data, understanding data is really important when having a tough conversation with someone who's underperforming.
What's your split, do you think, within your role of making sure they're hitting target, coaching and accountability, and then like other? So it might be admin, or it might be you actually on the phones, or it might be you going off and doing some research. Like, what do you think your split is, and where are you spending most of your time? Do you think from being a good manager, where should most of your time be spent?
It definitely changes from business to business. So when I talk about my current split in time, I wouldn't always recommend this for other businesses. It depends on size of team, size of business, industry. There's so many different factors that would determine this. But personally, right now, I would say 60% of my time goes towards the team. So looking at one-on-ones and pipeline reviews and enabling sort of lead lists at times, and jumping on calls, reviewing feedback, doing demos, looking at data and doing dashboards, preparing reports for C-suite each week. 60% of my time goes to that. I would say 20% goes to the admin of that. And then 20% is actually spent selling. It might even I think some weeks sometimes I spend more time selling and less time on admin when I need to, but it's generally like 60, 20.
And you think 20% of selling as a manager should still be a prerequisite for any manager in a sales team?
Oh, I don't know. Look, you know what? I'm going to say yes. I think as a sales leader, you should always be selling. I think it's really important that you are too, because you want to be able to be at the forefront of what your team who are on the front lines are dealing with. Are there certain objections that keep coming up that you've handled or had to handle that you can now share? Are there certain product gaps that you need to be made aware of that you're also hearing, that your team's hearing, and that you can also help move past? Are there competitive conversations that you're having that are more nuanced from when you were a seller that you need to be across? And that, the way that you think about the business might be different. And it's important that you are, imploring your team to think and do the same thing. So, and the only way that you're tapped into that stuff is by having conversations with your prospects. I think eventually, as you get to a certain point or certain type of leadership or seniority in leadership, those conversations start to happen at a more executive level, a more strategic level with strategic accounts. Sometimes those conversations are, with existing deals that your team's having and they're bringing on a VP, and then you're coming in and eating the conversation. Or it's because you're doing your own cold prospecting. You're meeting people or potential customers at events, but it's at a C-suite level, and you're enabling that conversation to happen to enable your team to have the conversation with a champion. So I think it should always be front of mind for sales leaders. Absolutely.
Love that explanation. I think that I fully agree. I think even me as running a business, and then we have a team, I do calls all the time, to show, and I don't have I have a number because I have a business to run, but, but outside of that, there's no target there. And if I close something and then I give it to somebody else to go and, develop further, or if I've got a meeting but I want somebody else to go out and fulfill it, they get the commission, they get the the kudos for it. And then I love seeing them move through in their career. And I think that comes back to what you were saying before, is that you no longer get the recognition. And I think that the buzz changes to it being somebody else's recognition, and that's what lights me up. And the same thing of what you said before. But I remember being in coming back to sales training, I remember being in so many rooms with, different vendors, and we'd have these sales trainers that would stand up, and they hadn't sold for 30 years. And their training was the same. The jokes were the same. We went to it every single year, one actually with HP, and every single year. And I promised to myself and my clients that I did not know existed just yet when I started the business, of I will always sell. If I'm training, I am selling, because as you just said, I can't train on something that I haven't experienced. And a lot has changed, in the last year, in the last 4 years, obviously more specifically. But I think that it's so interesting, and that's where the calling piece comes in. I do it with a lot of my clients, where I do cold calls for their prospects. And I'm like, it's not that scary. I will do one
Yeah.
right now, and then they give me their data and they look at me like I'm a weirdo. And, and away we go. And that is a buzz. Like that's the new sales buzz, I think, for me now.
Yep.
Doing that versus versus owning that within a team. But I think the fact that you need to be, I think you need to know what you're doing. You need to have some skin in the game. Otherwise, I think it's quite an interesting conversation. I get asked this a lot around, do you think sales managers or leaders need to have done the job or be able to do the job? And I 100% think they do. And I think you could have a sales admin that tracks numbers and, make sure that that the team are happy and put some pins on the board of $50 notes. But when they've got the ultimate challenge is, I've just spoken to this person, they've just told me this, what shall I do next? If you can't answer that, there's no point being there. They're not gonna respect you. You're not gonna add value to the team. And I think that that's a really interesting piece, as well as the other side of it, where they take their top performing salesperson, don't give them any support. They're not necessarily empathetic, and they're just driving towards them, being like, "Sweet, I don't have to make any calls anymore, and I'm going to make the same amount of money." We're stuck between those two, and we need to find something in the middle.
Completely agree. I think you always need to lead from the front and lead by example at times, especially when you have new salespeople coming into the team, senior salespeople coming into the team, because salespeople do come and go. It's important that you are almost reminding people why you're in the position that you're in. And look, that's not to say that you have to be the best seller in the room to be a sales leader. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Harriet, but personally, I don't think you need to be the best salesperson to be a sales leader at all. I think what the most important part about it is, do you have the qualities to be able to allow your team to feel like they're progressing and growing in their career and learning new skills that they wouldn't have learned without you?
And I guess that comes down to the skills that make a great salesperson. And it's not just the what do I say at this moment, but you need to be able to coach somebody through, what would you say and why would you say this, and why does this framing work, and why does this approach work, and if they're having a rubbish day, how do you pick them up and guide them through the next point? I think they're the pieces. There's so many elements of it. You could be better at this but not as good as this, and you still be a great sales leader. But it's around, what are the expectations, and as a business, are we going to lose our top salesperson to being a mediocre leader, or do we keep them in? And I think that comes down to what the individual sees as success. Because I see a lot of, especially in the generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs, around, I want to be a manager. I don't want to be a manager. That's that's not, when I was selling, that was definitely not what I wanted to do. I was a lone ranger. I was like, you let me out there, give me the resources, let me go, put me in the right direction, let me go. Whereas now, I've taken that back step, and I'm nurturing and supporting. But then I look at people that their next goal is, I want to be a manager, I want to manage a team. Oh, okay, well, like, why? The quality, like, you're a great person, you're great at this role, and maybe eventually, but do you understand what it actually means to lead and to manage? And I think that's one of the hardest jobs, is to manage a team, is to lead a team, because it's no longer just you're managing people's days, you're managing their emotions, you're managing how they're feeling, you're managing what else is going on at home. It's no longer just about what's happening in that Monday to Friday 9 till 5.
You're absolutely right. I think there are so many intangibles that don't get thought about. I want to move into sales leadership. Sales is actually one of the hardest disciplines to manage, because there are such big personalities. It is a very emotionally charged role. As a seller, you're on this, roller coaster of emotions constantly. Am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not? You're questioning yourself all the time, and your team will be going through those exact same emotions, and it ends up spurring on a lot of emotionally charged conversations. And a lot of the time, you're not, as a manager in every discipline within the corporate, is you're not just a manager and you're managing their time. You're also managing emotions. You're a counselor. You're a voice of reason. You're everything you could possibly think of to help another person be part of this person's career and growth. And a good manager, a good leader, is someone who can manage all of that, not just bring results, but their team is also extremely satisfied and content with having them in that person driving the car, steering the ship.
What are you seeing in Australia salespeople? What's the climate right now? What's working, what's not working? You're obviously mentoring people. I love Giant Blackbirds, by the way. I was a mentor there for 2 cohorts. Awesome.
Nice.
What's the climate? What are you seeing? What's the big challenges that are coming through? What are some of the wins that we're seeing? Any insights to share?
Yeah, I definitely try to keep my finger on the pulse in this space, especially in Australia. I've noticed probably in I would say the last couple of years, more than ever before, a big shift in the perception of the sales career. There are incredible businesses popping up that I'd love to shout out on this podcast, which is, the likes of Early Work, who is doing some incredible work within this region to empower graduates who are in university and allowing them to have the tools to step into sales as a serious career and learning things that you don't have traditional education on. They're providing it. And I think the shift is happening now in this region finally to where young people are starting to see sales as not this gross and sort of used car salesman perception that people would usually have, as a really sexy job. One where you can make a lot of money, one where you can work with really cool technology that's up and coming, one where you feel on top of the world when you're doing really well. And I think that perception is slowly shifting. You have a lot of graduates now wanting to join tech sales as a career, and there's a lot more resources coming in to sales in this region, like actual local resources, not just ones from the US, because there are 2 very different markets. So having localized knowledge and resources in this region is really important. And I finally feel that coming to fruition. And yeah, I think what that means is there's going to be more overseas companies now start to take Australia a bit more of a serious region. We already see this influx of US companies opening up an office here and hiring a few reps and maybe a leader. But I think that's going to happen more often than not now. I think smaller businesses are going to start trying to move over here and have it as a separate channel rather than just the States or even in EMEA. I think it's going to be considered as we're going to play on a global stage more. I think it's going to be a more level playing field now with all of the resources and talent that's coming out at the moment. There are some incredible people coming into the career that I've been able to meet. Young people who are just so driven and so motivated and like, I want to be a seller. Whereas before, I think like 6 years ago when I was in sales, it was that perception of, oh, you're in sales? Oh, does that mean you persuade people or manipulate people, like whenever you said that you were in sales? But I think it's shifted completely. So it's nice to see.
I think within Australia, I mean, obviously I'm English, that's my accent giving me away. 15 years ago, there's graduate, like in the UK, graduate programs, people were going into universities, finding people. I was hiring 15 people a week for sales, and hiring them, I was bringing them through a robust onboarding process, which got them on the phones within 5 days. And once they were on the phones within 2 to 4 weeks, we would progress them into a sales role or into an account management role or get rid of them. So it's brutal. But we would go through assessment days. There'd be 50 people. They'd want to get into sales, and a lot of them had done a business degree, a commerce degree, something around business, numbers. Even geographical was also quite interesting of where they were coming from, depending on the course. Now, based on what I've just said, you probably can tell I did not go to university, so I don't know any of the programs that are actually out there. But a lot of these people coming through there, it's a graduate program. They would come in, and I remember when I came to Australia nearly 11 years ago, and I was like, where are these graduate programs? Like, how are we getting people out of university? How are we getting people out of schools, standing the opportunity? And I totally agree. I think today, with the likes of Early Work, with the likes of, all of these graduate programs. And I think as well that, like you say, it's like the marketing around, around being a salesperson is there. I think TikTok helps, Instagram, it's all there. Everyone driving their nice cars. It's very materialistically driven. But it's showing that actually we can still be really good humans and still sell and make lots of money. So I look at the people that are doing well that I've known over the last 11 years. They've gotten into great organizations early on. They have they've received shares, as part of that onboarding. They're making a lot of money, especially when all these awesome companies are being bought by Google and Microsoft. And it's very exciting because they're now making a lot of money. And then that fuels the desire and the excitement around, let's go do something great again, because now that's going to fuel my family. It's going to fuel, my aspirations. But then now I'm going to go for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I agree. I think today there's a lot more around, I'm happy to be in sales. I think then it's around the expectations. I'm seeing a real shift in since COVID, because we had the inflation around. I remember somebody leaving, I can't remember what role they were in first, but they got offered a job at Salesforce and they were on like $450,000 OTE, and it was a guaranteed
Wow.
OTE for 6 months. And I was like, I'll go do that. Like, let me,
Yeah.
6 months at probably 50K and just chill out for a bit. And I think that was, that was that new dawn, and everyone went to work for Google and Microsoft, and all of a sudden everyone's let go, and there's now this massive pool of people in the industry, and now they want 250K base, and now they want all of this. And I think that's interesting, because yes, we've got these great people coming in, but how do you think the expectations are being set of new sellers that don't have experience? They've got drive, which is extremely important, but they haven't got experience. They're going through programs like early work, or they're early onset into an SDR, LDR, BDR role. What are you seeing there? Like, how can we help them navigate that better?
Yeah, this is a really tough one because, it comes down to, economics, which I also don't have any degree to back up in any sense of the word from university. So I share that, Harriet. But it comes down to like the economics of it too. So, but ultimately, I think this influx of graduates and resources for development means the caliber and the bar is being set higher and higher for the expectations of companies. And this is a really good thing, because it means, companies can demand, a bit more of a bigger skill gap to the quality of sales reps they want to hire. But I think what that means is eventually the salaries that they're needing to offer for more higher skilled reps will end up being higher and higher as time goes on too. So I don't know if we'll ever get back to, the $500,000 salaries, which they still exist, the $500,000 salaries paid out for 6 months at these massive companies. I just think the bar is going to be raised for companies and who they offer that $500,000 salary to, because I can tell you from experience in speaking to reps who are on those types of salaries, look, to be honest, I've met reps that earn half the amount that are twice the reps that they were. So I think that companies are going to reserve the right to have these massive inflated salaries for the right people, but rightfully so. And I think that sellers are more equipped than ever before in this region to be able to become a really top tier seller.
If you were to start from scratch and you had a blank slate or a blank canvas for building a sales team, how would you approach it?
I actually, you know what? Now that you asked me that question, I realize, and when I'm thinking back to the question you asked me about what value I received from LinkedIn, I would make a post on LinkedIn. And I've done that multiple times when I've had an open role in my team. And I'll actually post my phone number. I'll say a bit about the company, about the role, and then I'll post my phone number at the end of it. So sellers here at the company that I'm working for at the moment, 80% of their pipeline is outbound. It's our biggest channel to date. It's always been our highest and most successful channel. So we make sure that the sellers we bring in are comfortable with, dialing the phone and self-sourcing their own deals. And a way that I like to do it is I'll make a post on LinkedIn. I'll put my phone number at the end of my post, and I'll just take every cold call I can for the next week, depending on who wants to call me. I've hired some of the best reps on my team from this approach. And so I would do the same thing again. I would make a post on LinkedIn, put my number there, allow people to cold call me. And then that would be my initial screening. I'd ask my initial screening questions. I'd be extremely transparent on the phone about the role. And if they want to move forward after the transparent answers to their questions that I've had, I'll then ask if they want to do a first round interview with me. So I would absolutely utilize LinkedIn.
I've leveraged LinkedIn, and everyone on my team has come from LinkedIn. So I'm really intrigued by that response. Everybody's from LinkedIn. And I always get asked, like, where do you recruit? How do you find? I was like, LinkedIn, like every time. And sometimes, I have had referrals. But I hired a girl in London on LinkedIn because she did a post around finishing up in a role. She'd had experience, and I was like, I need someone for 3 months to do a project in the UK. I'll take her. So I messaged her. I called her like 20 minutes later because I was just about to jump in the car, and we had an hour conversation. And then we did a 3-hour conversation, I think, the next time. And then And after that, she did a 3-month project for us. And the one thing I find really interesting, you just said there about being really transparent about the expectations of the role. I think from both sides of the coin of being an employer and an employee, I think being really clear on the expectations is extremely important, because there's a lot of businesses where I've gone into to do sales training and enablement or build a new strategy. And when I speak to salespeople and I do a survey, it says, what are you hoping to get from this session, or what are you hoping to learn, or how are you hoping to improve your sales process? A lot of the time they're like, oh, I don't sell. I was like, what do you mean you don't sell? They're like, oh, I'm here. I get leads and I follow up those leads, or I'm out to network, or I'm out to do this. And that blows my mind, because a lot of people think if we tell them they've got a cold call, they won't want to work here. So we won't tell them, and we'll get them in, and then it will all be good. And I'm like, you're missing the point, because if you do that, you're now going to be left with somebody that's either pissed off because they're in a role that they didn't agree to, or that they're having to do something that they didn't expect to, and then now your expectations are different to their expectations, and nobody's going to win. So I think that's a really important thing to highlight. I would always be worst case scenario than best case scenario.
I completely agree. One thing that I, from day one, from that, even if it's the first cold call, if we're calling that day one with my interaction with the seller on the team, sometimes I will have met them at an event, or sometimes they've called me from one of my posts on LinkedIn. I always set very, very, very clear expectations, and also what the reality of the situation is. I hate when companies try to set an alluring OTE there for, sellers, and no one on the team is hitting target. It's like, why sell the dream and then come in and then just destroy the perception that you've created, and then have to return over that role and rehire that role in the next 3 to 6 months because they didn't pass probation, or because they didn't want to stay at your damn company because you've sold them the dream. It's so important to have that transparency from the start, Harriet, exactly like you mentioned, and just being really real with how much money they can make, how much money some of the top sellers are making in commission alone, and what the actual role entails when it comes to the diversity of the sales pipeline. Like, where are they actually sourcing deals from? If you're really open and honest about that from the start, you'll actually start to have much higher quality candidates that are better suited to that role from the start.
If you could give one piece of advice to an AE starting out, or an AE looking to get into a leadership role, what would it be?
Really question whether you want the leadership role or not, and question whether you're ready internally as a person for the move. Do you want to continue being LeBron James and IC and taking home massive pay, or are you willing to take a pay cut in the short term to be able to empower someone else to have that spotlight, not even share the spotlight, to take the spotlight away? That's the one question and one thing you need to ponder before ever saying, I want to move into sales leadership.
Thank you, Bryce. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, make sure you hit follow or subscribe, because I guarantee you won't want to miss next week's episode.